Lee Anderson didn't hold back. He put it to Keir Starmer directly in the Commons. Does the Prime Minister agree that every single illegal migrant coming to this country should be detained, not allowed to claim asylum, and then deported?
2 nurses were kicked out of their HMO, and Serco put 4 illegal migrants in this HMO. One of these illegal migrants was a Pakistani national. He went on to rape a young girl, a vulnerable young girl, on a park in Ashford. He's now doing 14 years in prison. This was a monster allowed into this country by this awful government. But if a Prime Minister is really serious about protecting young women and girls, does he agree with me and Reform UK that every single illegal migrant coming to this country should be detained, not allowed to claim asylum, and then deported?
Simple question. Yes or no? Watch what happens next. Welcome to Politics and Principles, where we don't just discuss politics, but the principles that should be driving political decisions and actions. Today, we are looking at the 2 most fundamental principles of leadership: building trust and accepting responsibility.
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'm very proud of the fact that after net migration reached almost 1 million under the party opposite, we brought it down by 82%. On the asylum system, which he references, now asylum decisions are made at record levels, the backlog is down, removals are up 41%, and we're closing asylum hotels. They lost control of our borders. Now small boat crossings are coming down, and we deported 70,000 people with no right to be here.
You would have thought that a Prime Minister who had been forced to resign would have used that momentum differently. That he would have finally said something real, something that showed he got it, something that might have allowed him to leave office with at least a thread of a legacy on the issue that has defined and damaged his time in Downing Street. Instead, we got this. And here's the thing with that. Trust between a leader and the people they serve starts with one very basic requirement. What you say has to match what people actually experience. When a leader answers a straight question with a list of statistics, they're not being thorough. They're signaling that their own political safety matters more than your right to a straight answer. That's not a small thing. That's a foundation cracking. So let's take those numbers seriously, because the British public deserves that. Official figures show over 41,000 channel crossings in 2025 alone, up in some reports from the previous year. Tens of thousands more since Labour took power. That is not down in any way that means anything to the communities bearing the strain. The 70,000 deportations, that figure includes voluntary returns alongside enforced removals. The headline number blends categories to sound more impressive than the reality warrants. And here's a simple test. If 70,000 people were genuinely being removed effectively, why isn't the government broadcasting it proudly every single week? Because somewhere they know the reality doesn't match the claim. And this is how trust gets destroyed. It follows a pattern every single time. A promise gets made, smash the gangs, stop the boats. Then reality arrives. 41,000 crossings, hotels still in use, communities under pressure. Then comes the part that does the real damage. The gap gets explained away. Statistics get reframed. Categories get blended. Partial wins get dressed up as full victories. People notice. They always notice. Each time that cycle runs, they don't just distrust the policy, they distrust the person. And that is a much harder hole to climb out of. Leaders have to close the gap between what they promised and what's real, or they have to honestly admit it exists. Papering over it destroys both. Then there's a one-in, one-out arrangement with France. A few returned under a pilot scheme, while hundreds came the other direction. Hardly the deterrent needed to deliver on smash the gangs, as Starmer repeatedly promised. Reports of illegal migrants housed in hotels, HMOs, and brand new properties, some worth hundreds of thousands in prime locations, while British families wait years for council housing. Pressure on GPs, schools, local services, communities feeling the change not in statistics but in daily life. Military-aged men arrive weekly, young professionals and families leaving. Brain drain and capital flight don't help the people left behind. Any government can adjust definitions and statistics. include or exclude categories, and present numbers that flatter. What people see with their own eyes carries more weight than any definition or statistics. And when what you see contradicts what you're told, whatever trust remains breaks completely. Which brings us to responsibility. Because Starmer had a moment in Parliament. Even under pressure, a leader with genuine accountability would have said, here's what hasn't worked. Here's what we got wrong. Here's what changes now. That's what it looks like when someone actually accepts responsibility. Instead, we got the scoreboard of wins. Claiming credit selectively while the losses go unacknowledged isn't responsibility. It's the performance of it. And people who have watched politics long enough know the difference between the two without being told. Real responsibility means facing the full picture, especially the uncomfortable parts, and putting the people you serve ahead of protecting your own position. That's not an elevated standard, that's the baseline. Here's what these two principles together tell us about where things stand. Once a leader is seen to be managing perception rather than serving the people, the damage compounds. Spin erodes trust. Harder truth become harder to tell. So more spin gets used until eventually nothing they say on the subject land anymore. That is the road we're on. And here's what every leader eventually learns. Usually too late. The short-term cost of honesty and real accountability is always lower than the long-term cost of avoiding them. Always. Think about what was actually available to Starmer in that moment. He could have stood up and said, the crossings are still too high. The hotels should never have been used. And here is exactly what we are doing differently from today. That would have cost him politically in the short term, but it would have been the beginning of rebuilding something. Public confidence, credibility, an actual legacy worth having. Instead, he chose statistics. Instead, we get spin. And now the public doesn't believe anything Starmer and Labour have to say on this issue. This isn't about compassion versus control. It's about fairness, rule of law, a system that actually functions. A functioning system deters illegal entry, processing asylum claims honestly and quickly, and removes those with no right to stay. When that breaks down, trust in the whole system goes with it. Britain deserves a government that tells the hard truth, not what focus groups say people want to hear, the actual truth. And leaders who own their own failures as clearly as they claim their wins, that's not a high bar, that's the minimum. So the question for you, did Starmer answer Lee Anderson's question? Are these statistics genuine progress, or a case study in exactly what broken trust and avoided responsibility look like in practice? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you want more of this, the political insight alongside the principles that should sit behind every decision in Westminster, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Share it with someone tired of the spin. Thanks for watching. Stay informed. Stay engaged. Britain deserves better. See you in the next one.